in the Delaware Basin. Thank you, Erin. So again, thank you and welcome to the Tracking Pollution in the Delaware Basin Tools for Community Action webinar. My name is Colleen Walters. I'm the Delaware Basin Program Manager for River Network. I'm joined by my colleague Erin Kanzing, who's the River Programs Policy and River Research Associate at River Network. And for folks who are maybe unaware of River Network, we are a national organization that works to grow and strengthen a network of water justice and river advocates. We provide tools, resources, and support to groups seeking clean water for all people and nature. We have just recently updated, we did a strategic refresh, so we have a new mission and vision, and you can find that at rivernetwork.org. You can also find our newly updated Clean Water Act Owners Manual and our SRF Toolkit. Those are two of our most recent resources that we have released, so definitely check out rivernetwork.org for those resources. So today we are going to go through our new resource, Tracking Pollution in the Delaware River, the webpage. And then after that, we are going to kick it over to learn more about how folks in at the community level have been taking action to try and solve these pollution issues in their neighborhood. So we are going to hear from Elizabeth Cute of Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. She is the Community Engagement Program Manager, and we'll be talking about the bacteria monitoring program and advocacy. And then we're going to hear from Ryan Neuman, the Upstream Conservation Leader with Tacony-Frankford Watershed Partnership, and David Bell, who is a TTF volunteer streamkeeper, Master Watershed Steward, Merchant Marine Officer, and author. And they are going to talk about their construction site stormwater monitoring and chloride testing. So before we get started, I also have some poll questions. And Erin, if you could please launch that poll for us. We are curious if your organization has volunteers or engaged community members. If your organization does have volunteers, do you provide programming for them? And then what kind of pollution sources have you observed in your watersheds? We're certainly going to talk about a couple of these today, but we are curious what folks are experiencing. And if you do hit other, please certainly put it in the chat so we can hear about those other sources of pollution that you're dealing with. And Erin, I can't actually see the poll. So if you want to just read out the results, I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so for the first one, does your organization have volunteers or engaged community members? We've got 20 folks who answered, 17 of whom said yes, 3 said no. The second question, if yes, does your organization provide programming for your volunteers? 15 out of 21 folks said yes, 2 people said no, and around 4 people said NA. And then for the third question, what are some of the pollution sources you have observed in your watershed or community? We've got 33% of people saying combined sewer overflows, 33% sanitary sewer overflows, 86% road salt. Construction site runoff is 57%, and flooding and stormwater runoff is 86%. Agricultural runoff, 52%, and other is 5%. So lots of different sources.
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and end the poll. I don't know if it might pop up the results too, so folks can see.
Yeah, wow, okay, so that is wonderful. I really hope that this resource that we are about to share is helpful, especially for the folks that do have those volunteers and engaged community members. And yeah, lots of sources of pollution, which we know we will only talk about 4 today, but we hope that this resource can be applicable to really any form of pollution. So our webpage, Erin, if you could please put the link in the chat, and I'll walk through it in just a second, but the concept for these tools really came out of our work with construction site monitoring. And there's a program called Muddy Water Watch by the Waterkeeper Alliance, and another program called Get the Dirt Out, developed by Chattahoochee Riverkeeper. And the idea really centers on community members being our greatest tool in helping to report and stop pollution events from occurring in our watersheds. Oftentimes when folks see a problem in their neighborhoods, they want to do something, but they don't necessarily know who to turn to, who to call, and that often can lead to inaction. And so providing folks with tools and resources on what to do when these issues arise can lead to less pollution entering our rivers and streams. So this webpage is meant to be a tool for watershed and community organizations to really begin thinking about some of the most common sources of pollution in your communities and to tailor programs or provide resources to community members and volunteers to be aware, to make and record observations, and to take action if needed. So we had surveyed groups in the Delaware Basin, and that's sort of where these four sources of pollution came from. These are some typical sources that folks will encounter, and based on the poll, I think that's also pretty spot on. So this is, again, by no means an exhaustive list, but just a select few. And again, if you are experiencing some other sources of pollution, we hope that you can take sort of the general framework or outline of these examples to tackle those issues as well. So as you'll see, I'll walk through the webpage in just a second. We have sort of a framework or an outline for each of these sources. We start with a brief overview of the issue, how to identify the problem, tips for observations, and action checklists. And we also highlight several examples of how folks are using innovative ways to engage their community members in understanding how their waterways are impacted by pollution and how they can take action. And Liz and Ryan and Dave will be providing some of those examples too after I walk through the webpage. So let's go to the webpage right now. So here is really just the landing page. And again, it's sort of just reiterating what I just went over, and we have the four sources of pollution listed right here. So we're going to start with construction site monitoring. And as I said, this was sort of the first one that we wanted to tackle. And really the idea is that your community members or volunteers, they are walking in their neighborhoods, they are driving in their neighborhoods, they're seeing construction sites. And if they are seeing things like muddy water or improper erosion structures, they need the tools to help to identify that those are actually pollution sources or improper use of those BMPs. And so we have listed here some action steps. And I think one of the really great resources from Muddy Water Watch, which is the pictorial field guide. And so I just want to walk through it real quickly. And again, this came from Muddy Water Watch, and we sort of adapted it to be more relevant to the Delaware River Basin. So all of these pictures are things that folks might see in their neighborhoods in the Delaware River Basin. And you'll see sort of the top row of pictures here are, what you should be seeing on a construction site. And then the second row and the bottom row, they're, problematic pictures of things that you might need to keep an eye on or you might need to report. We have a site report card here on the left. These are a list of best management practices that folks might see out and about, and kind of just a clear checkbox of yes or no, are they properly functioning? And then if you go down to the second page, there's a section for contact information. This is really important, and I think you'll find for every one of these sources of pollution, they will have a different contact person depending on where you are. So we did this exercise for folks in the suburban Philadelphia area, and we worked with 4 different counties, and each of the 4 counties mentioned that they had a different sort of first response contact. So you really want to do some research and understand who your county or your folks in the DEP, who they would prefer you to contact first when you do see a pollution event occurring. So this field guide is a fantastic printout and resource for your volunteers and something to customize to what y'all are seeing in your particular watersheds. And it also talks about site journals and the importance of really recording your observations and taking pictures and things like that. And then follow up. It's really important once you do make that initial call to follow up and make sure that someone is coming out to the site to really correct the problem. And Dave and Ryan will talk a little bit more about their work on construction site monitoring too in just a bit. So the next one I want to talk about is flood monitoring. And so now, of course, with climate change, we're seeing more intense storms, more frequent storms, and you may be finding that there are areas that are experiencing flooding that maybe have never experienced it before, or they're experiencing more intense, more increased amounts of flooding. So one thing that you can really highlight for your community members and volunteers is the importance of reporting those flooding events. And reporting of flooding really is important when it comes to funding and infrastructure prioritization. And so here, we have collected some contact information from the 4 basin states of who to contact if you do see flooding events. There are also some specific state examples. The city of Philadelphia has an online flood reporting system. And then we have also worked with folks who have conducted their own neighborhood surveys. So looking at our community-led research toolkit, we have information on how to conduct neighborhood surveys. And so a group in Somerville, Massachusetts really went throughout their neighborhood to figure out who was experiencing flooding, to what degree, how was it impacting them, et cetera. And they took that information and talked to their local decision makers to help influence the infrastructure funding decisions. And then we can, I know I'm walking through this very quickly, but definitely take your time and go through these links and check back in with me if you have any questions. So we're going to go now to road salt monitoring. I'm not going to go too in depth in this because I know Ryan and Dave will also be talking about it, but it's winter time. We see salt piles on our sidewalks, on our parking lots, on our neighborhood driveways. And there are ways for our community members to take action, and there are some great resources, like the Isaac Walton League has a winter salt watch program, and they also give out chloride testing strips for folks to go and test the local streams. And that data, along with observational data, really recording, getting that site journal out and recording where the salt piles are, how long they've been there, when the most recent, snowfall was, things like that are really important information to collect, and then go to your local decision makers, go to your State Department of Transportation if it's on state roads. There's a lot of advocacy and opportunities for volunteers and community members to take action here. And again, Ryan and Dave will be talking a bit about this as well. And then finally, combined sewer overflows. So, as many of you said, combined sewers or sanitary sewers, they are an issue in your watersheds. So combined sewers, we see them in the older urban areas like Philadelphia, Camden, and Wilmington. And they occur when there is a combined sewer system. So the wastewater and stormwater all go into the same pipe, as opposed to a separate sewer system where wastewater and stormwater have separate piping systems. So when it rains in a combined sewer area, then the piping gets overflowed and discharges into our local rivers and streams. So untreated wastewater is going into our rivers and streams. So one of the first steps here is really identifying where your CSOs are located, and just being more aware of where they are, and helping your volunteers and community members to learn more about where they are. And so each of the 4 basin states have either a mapping or a location system where you can locate the CSOs, and also identifying what they might look like. How do you identify a CSO? And then some action steps, really again with that site journal, taking observations. Things like, is the CSO currently discharging? When was the last rainfall? What does the water look like around the CSO? Is it muddy? Are there floating debris? Do you see fish or wildlife present? Are folks swimming nearby? or recreating in the water. So those are just some good observations to make as you are observing the CSOs. And then when it comes time to take action, you really want to identify who your volunteers should be contacting. Is it the owner of the CSO, the permittee, or the folks that are distributing the permit? So we have information here about how to review your local discharge permits as well. All the CSOs are point source discharges, so they fall under the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permitting under the Clean Water Act. And bacterial monitoring is also a great avenue to collect data and information on the CSOs and how it's impacting the waterways. And so if you have a water quality monitoring program, incorporating bacteria monitoring is an option. And we will hear from Liz at Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, who has conducted bacteria monitoring and advocacy around CSOs. And I also want to highlight the work that Mobile Baykeeper has done in Alabama. They are working with sanitary sewer systems, but they have a public notification system where if folks see discharges happening, they have a notification system where you can go to their website or call in the discharge. And through their advocacy, they have also had their Department of Environmental Protection require that utilities in their emergency response plans and their NIPDES permits incorporate mapping and email notification programs with the idea that everyone has the right to know when these discharges are happening in their waterways. So that's also a really great example to check out if you're interested in starting sort of a notification system for your volunteers. So I know that was really quick and I just briefly went over all 4 of those, but and again, if you have pollution sources that that aren't listed here, we encourage you to sort of take the framework of making those observations, having action checklists, having contact information specific to your area for your volunteers to really provide them with resources, understanding that if they don't know who to call, if they don't know what to do, then that might lead to inaction. So being proactive and providing them with these resources might help to prevent some additional pollution from entering our waterways. So with that, I want to hand it over to Liz to talk about her programming with Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper.
Awesome, thank you. And awesome overview of the new webpage. I'm going to share a couple of resources with some of our other staff. So there's always things to learn and share with others. All right, so my name is Liz Cute. I work at Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. And like Colleen said, I'll be talking a bit about some of our water quality monitoring programming and how we use the data we collect and our other efforts towards outreach to the community and advocacy efforts. So if you don't know Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, we're part of the Waterkeeper Alliance. We're here in Western New York. Our offices are based out of Buffalo. And our mission is to protect and restore our waterways and surrounding ecosystems for the benefit of future and current Western New Yorkers, connect people to water, and inspire economic growth and community engagement. Here we are in the Great Lakes Basin. We are focused our work in the Niagara River watershed, so right in between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario and along the Niagara River. And that's a huge watershed over a huge area of land. So we do a lot of project work and we focus a lot of our work along our initiatives, which include headwaters restoration, community engagement, waterway revitalization, and living shorelines. So we do a lot more than just volunteer engagement. We do big construction and restoration projects, a recent culvert restoration project in our headwaters for some native brook trout, a lot of cool work being done here in Western New York. But I focus a lot of my work amongst our education programs and our volunteer programs, specifically our water quality monitoring program, Riverwatch. So I'll give a quick overview of that and then focus in on some of our bacterial monitoring efforts. So we have a lot of opportunities for our Riverwatch volunteers based on the time that they have to volunteer. We have some lower some opportunities that don't take as much time. The scheduling is very up to them. So we utilize the Water Reporter app and program, so folks can get out in the watershed and make observations. They could make observations of pollution, and we get an email of those photos. We can look back at this map and see what's happening in this watershed, because our staff can't be everywhere. So this is an extension of eyes and ears out in our watershed, showing us what's going on during different times of the year. We've seen some really cool wildlife sightings, some pollution issues, harmful algal blooms, and ways folks are recreating and using the water. So we do a little training for our volunteers that are interested in learning to use this app. We also have volunteers participate in Nurdle Patrol, which is a nationwide citizen science project. And you can see there's Nurdle Patrol volunteers all over, and they're expanding into South America as well. So we've been able to locate areas of nurdle pollution and done some tracking to what facilities that pollution might be coming from, and having conversations with our Department of Environmental Conservation, municipal stormwater staff to see what happened, what can we do to rectify the solution, the situation, so it doesn't happen in the future. So we've seen a lot of these nurdles along the Niagara River, which is a drinking water source. So definitely concerning. And now folks know how to collect this data using an app or a web page. Here's a zoom in. We've been growing over the last 3 years or so. And you can see where some hot spots are showing up. And this definitely gives us some great information to start to look, upstream sources. Where could the source of that pollution be? We also have volunteers always paying attention during the summer and early fall months for harmful algal blooms. And this is another way we're using Water Reporter to map this information so folks can see where these blooms are occurring. All those little clipboards on the maps are different reported blooms, and they may or may not be a confirmed cyanobacteria bloom. But if you click on those little clipboards on our website, you'll find more information and photos. Was it a cyanobacteria bloom? Was it a euglena bloom? Was it confirmed by our staff or confirmed additionally by the Department of Environmental Conservation if they're able to get out, which isn't all the time. So we try to do sampling and microscopy to figure out what species we're looking at. And then we'll also share this information on social media with the Department of Health and other parks staff if it is a cyanobacteria bloom, since there's a high health risk there. We have volunteers that go out monthly to different waterways to collect baseline water chemistry using probes and sensors and collecting data in the field so that we can get that data on our website. Utilizing Water Reporter helps visualize that data in a nice way, and that data is available monthly. This kind of helps fill a gap since our state agencies are only collecting a lot of robust water quality data in our watershed on a rotating scale every few years. So this gives us a nice health checkup on our waterways monthly to see trends and also track progress of different restoration projects. And E. coli monitoring, which is the focus here today. We've had our staff do some E. coli monitoring in our watershed for the last several years. Here you're seeing a Petri dish sample after incubation using ColScan Easy Gel technique. We've used that for a few years. We're going to be transferring to a different method this year. Since there's a lot of colors here, if anyone has color blindness, this would be very difficult for them to read. You're looking for those dark purple, dark blue dots to be E. coli. The others are the pinks and the teals are not E. coli. They're other species. So we are out sampling at 10 to 20 sites per year throughout our watershed. And we are looking at sites that are combined sewer overflows, or there's a lot of recreation occurring at this site, and there might be septic systems in the area, there might be sanitary sewer overflows. So our site selection is based on a few different factors, but here is one of our sites with warning signage along the Buffalo River, and it is a very common recreation zone. And we do our monitoring during wet weather events and dry weather events so that we can compare the different weather events and see the difference in the data. And I'll show a data chart later on, but we've been able to map our combined sewer overflows. We've been able to find those coordinates for our state and for our watershed, and we've mapped this on our website so folks can find this information easily. Since it was a little tricky for us to find it, you got to dig a little. So we've made it a little bit more accessible. So here are the CSOs in Western New York, the black dots, and then we've been mapping our E. coli results as well. And those would be either the gray shapes here, and maybe those are old sites we haven't monitored this year, sites we've monitored this year, or this would be the 2022 data, would be appearing either the green or red for pass or fail. And we're comparing that to the EPA's beach action value for our monitoring processes. So this has helped us, our staff who lead kayak tours, help to make safe decisions for leading events. You know, we know it rained a lot. We know the site we're launching from. We know the locations of the CSOs. We can keep our staff and our tour guests safe. And then we can also present this information to the public so they can make smart water recreation decisions as well. This year, we're switching gears and using what are called R cards. And this is going to make counting the E. coli colonies a lot easier because there's not a color differentiation. It's only showing E. coli colonies on this test card here. So if any of our staff have, color blindness, they can still count the data. So it's making the data collection and analyzation more inclusive. We're really excited about that. There'll be less plastic waste. There's still the same incubation period. So, we still have a delay on getting results, but we like to do this in-house at our offices in our little lab, rather than sending the data, sending the sample of water to an outside lab, because we won't get that data back for several days or weeks. And this, we can get the data back the next day and share that information out in a very timely fashion. Here's one way that we showcase our data in our River Watch report at the end of the year. You can see on the x-axis all our different sampling sites, and then E. coli colonies on our y-axis here. The red line going across is that EPA beach action value, and that's our kind of threshold for that pass or fail of maybe think about recreating in the water, or if it's way below that, you're in better shape. And you can see wet weather is represented by the blue bars, dry weather days by that tannish orange. And for the most part, wet weather, high E. coli levels, except for a few sites that maybe don't have a lot of bacterial inputs. We have seen some outliers here along the Black Rock Canal. on the year that this data was collected. And this is an example of where we did some more further investigating along that site and along that waterway. We did some additional sampling upstream and downstream of the known CSOs to try to track down if maybe there was a potential leak happening, because we usually see very low levels during dry weather at that site historically. So now we have data from year to year to kind of show, we would expect this. And if we see something different, then we can do a little digging. And we reached out to the sewer authority that's near that site and has the CSO permits, and as well as the Department of Environmental Conservation to alert them of what we were seeing. We also did some DNA source tracking to find out if it was human sources or other animal sources through some other kits that we're able to purchase online. So what do we do with the data? I've hinted at this a little bit while I was talking. We get the data out to our community followers and stakeholders through our webpage, our social media accounts. We create lessons for teachers in the local area relating to water quality, CSO, and data. We also lead lessons through our different educational programs, bringing students out to CSOs, doing sampling so they can learn what's happening in their local waterways, and then teaching them how to report of an issue if they're seeing something out of the ordinary. Who do they call? Where do they find information online? And our staff also is working to communicate with local municipal leaders and elected officials to advocate for funding to get directed towards solutions to these bacterial solutions and other waterway pollution issues, and put funding towards infrastructure improvements or green infrastructure in Western New York. And our volunteers and our followers help to keep eyes and ears on the water to keep an eye on conditions. They know where the CSOs are, so that helps us have up-to-date information so that we can communicate and bring up issues to local agencies as well. So there's some examples of social media posts that we'll do to inform folks, if we're seeing really high water levels, but then, it's a beautiful sunny day, they're not thinking, ooh, there might be a lot of E. coli in the water. So we do a lot of that education through our social media to get the word out. All right, and we'll save questions for the end, Colleen, that's fine, but thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, Liz. That was great. And yeah, if folks have questions, please put them in the chat and we can get to them at the end. But now we're going to move to Ryan and Dave.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Neuman, as Colleen said, from Tacony-Frankford Watershed Partnership. So we are based in the suburban Philadelphia area. So the TTF watershed is about a 30 square mile watershed that encompasses both Philadelphia as well as some of the lower parts of Montgomery County. We focus on stewardship, education, restoration, advocacy as work on our mission, which is really connecting our communities to their creeks. Like I said, we do work in Montgomery County, which really focuses on restoration work, working with the local municipalities, monitoring work, and then really supporting that restoration work and educating the community. In Philadelphia, we focus a lot more on education and getting people into the park, which is Tacony Creek Park, which is one of the major watershed parks in Philadelphia. So one of the ways that we help to connect our creeks and our communities is through volunteer programs. So one of those volunteer programs is our Streamkeeper program, which has been around since 2014 through funding from the William Penn Foundation through the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. We partner on this with a couple other suburban Philadelphia partners who I see are on here today, so I'll mention them. Pennypack Ecological Restoration Trust and Wissahickon Trails as well. We all sort of work on collaboratively the same sort of things and share volunteers and share training opportunities. So I mentioned our stream keepers, who, like I said, are volunteers from the community who really, they keep eyes on the creek. We have a small staff, so we can't get out to all the sections of our watershed, but they also really become informed community members who care about the watershed, who know a lot about the watershed, and who are involved in educating the local community, the municipalities, and then helping at events as well. So Dave, who's going to speak here in a moment, he has been one of our stream keepers for a number of years now. Been wonderfully fantastic and done great education stuff and been helpful in monitoring and events and stuff. Can't say enough good things about him. He's going to talk about the construction site monitoring. A little bit of personal experience from him. So just a little bit of background. We began working with construction site monitoring a number of years ago with Wissahickon Trails and the Pennypack Trust. We reached out to River Network and we helped them, and they helped us to adapt sort of that program that Colleen had shown that has the scorecard there and the resources really to report the data. So that's sort of what I'll say about that. And I'll pass it on to Dave to talk a little bit about some of his personal experience. After he's done talking about that, we'll transition into talking about road salt a little bit. I'll have a brief presentation sort of on some of that data and how we've been communicating that. And then as he adds some stuff in as well. So I'll turn it over to you now, Dave.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. My name is Dave Bell. As Ryan said, I'm one of the stream keepers, volunteer stream keepers with TTF. That entails going out and doing monthly observations, usually with a partner. And we also have several times throughout the year, TTF, along with Wissahickon and Pennypack watershed groups, offer training for stream keepers. And one of these was on construction site runoff. And it entailed information about best management practices, permitting and compliance, and also the negative impacts of construction site runoff on water quality and aquatic life. Around the same time, I was enrolled in Penn State Extension's Master Watershed Steward training program. So I wasn't really going out looking for threats to water quality, but I was pretty sensitized to that kind of thing. So soon after the training, I was going by a local high school construction site that you see here on a rainy day. Next slide, please, Ryan. And I saw sediment on the sidewalk. Next slide. And running off into the street and down the storm drain that I knew led directly to Bader Creek, which is one of the headwaters of Tookany Creek. So I took pictures and I called the county conservation, soil conservation district, and they put me in touch with one of their resource conservationists. He wasn't interested in seeing the pictures I took. He said he would have to go down there and look at the site himself. He said that there were controls in place, but they might have failed, and he would take a look at it. And then I asked him to let me know what he found. After 2 weeks, I hadn't heard from the guy. So I called him back and he admitted he hadn't done anything, hadn't gone down there and looked at it. And I knew that the forecast was for some more rain in the next few days. So I didn't want to wait for him again. So this time I contacted someone in my township who I had met, who was the communications person. And she passed along my information to the township engineer. And again, they were not interested in seeing the photographs. They wanted to go down there themselves. So the township engineer went down and reported back to me that there had been controls in place, but they were failing. And he had the construction site manager correct those errors and put controls back in place. And the next time I went by, I saw that the runoff from the site appeared to be clean. So that took care of that situation. I think the County Soil Conservation District could have handled it, but the lesson here was that I had to try a couple of different approaches to getting everyone, getting the situation taken care of. Also, I have to, in addition to Ryan for, setting up the training, I have to tip my hat to Kevin Roth at Pennypack Ecological Restoration Trust, because he did a lot of that training presentation, and he talked about his experiences with construction site runoff in the Pennypack watershed. Another one of the training sessions we had was on winter salt, and it was through the Isaac Walton League Winter Salt Watch program. And I signed up for that after getting the training and started monitoring sites a couple of sites in our watershed. And then I learned that other stream keepers were doing the same thing. And then Ryan had engaged in another program with Stroud Water Research Center to do some more intensive monitoring. So I'm going to turn that over to Ryan now.
Thanks, Dave. So I'm just going to sort of jump in, talk a little bit about the local examples to our watershed. That's sort of some of the data that we've seen that's led us to investigate a little bit further. And then from there, we'll sort of talk a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing education-wise with the community and with our local municipalities as well. So the first slide you'll see here then is just going to be a screen grab of a graph from Monitor My Watershed, which is from a Enviro DIY logger that we have in partnership with Stroud Water Research Center again. So this chart here is from a small tributary to the Tookany Creek called the Shoemaker Run. Has a really developed headwaters, pretty developed all the way through, but it wasn't necessarily a creek section that we had looked at before until we had moved this Enviro DIY over to this watershed in support of some restoration work that we were working on last year, or I guess 2 years ago now, since we're in 2023. So in 2021, we moved this in the middle of the summer. We had it out for a winter season. And so you'll see here, this graph here is from the winter of 2021 into 2022. So just from January to February, anybody who's local to Philadelphia area remembers we had a lot of snow last year during that time. So you'll see on this chart here then, we're going to have the conductivity measured in microsiemens per centimeter. And then just across the bottom axis is the dates then. Across the span of about a month and a half to 2 months, we had conductivity spikes that were indicative of a serious issue, to say the least. So you can see here, there's 5 spikes that have eclipsed 50,000 microsiemens per centimeter, which is, as a benchmark, is roughly about the conductivity of seawater. And you'll notice one spike at about the end of January that went over 100,000, which again would equate to about twice the conductivity of seawater then. So this sort of got us to thinking, about the short-term effects on the stream itself, the aquatic life in the stream, but also what some of those more long-term effects might be, and also what we might be seeing in other parts of the watershed as well that we hadn't previously looked at before. Oop, went the wrong way. So in conjunction with looking at those continuous monitors, we also did a couple grab samples in partnership with Stroud last year. We worked with a couple volunteers who lived locally, who were able to get out during the snowstorm and snow melt afterwards. And so you can see here 4 different samples that they got on the left on this chart. The bottom axis, again, is going to be the conductivity level at which they collected that sample. And then on the vertical axis is going to be what the chloride numbers were after Stroud had analyzed them. That red line you're going to see there is about roughly what the chloride in milligrams per liter is of seawater. So it's a little over 19,000, like 19,400. It's like a rough estimate. So you can see here, we had one sample that was at about 18,000 milligrams per liter of chloride. And so one thing you'll notice about this chart that's sort of significant too is we didn't have any grab samples that were from the 50,000 and up club per se on microsiemens per centimeter of conductivity. So the chloride obviously got significantly higher in some storm events as well. And transitioning a little bit further, still looking at the same sensor station. This is just a grab from the online data again from June of 2022 here. So, I went the wrong way again. From June of 2022 for a couple days, and you can see there's still a pretty elevated conductivity level. You're seeing a conductivity of about 1,200 microsiemens per centimeter, which is still high even outside of the winter season, which might be indicative of other issues carrying over with road salts in regard to the stream. So again, this was just one previously unstudied section of stream that we hadn't looked at before. So it got us to thinking, what about other sections of stream in our watershed? Again, there's a lot of tributary streams in Montgomery County. We have a small staff. We don't necessarily study every stream rather intensively. So this got us to enacting sort of this year in partnership with Stroud again, a volunteer program, sort of first of its kind, called a chloride blitz, where we worked with our stream keepers again, and we had them come out and help us on specific days outside of the wintertime season during base flow conditions in the stream to get a number of water samples that we tested using chloride test strips and conductivity probes to get an idea of what the salt level and the conductivity level were in these sections of stream, not during the winter, to test and see if there were still effects of salt in our streams other times of the year when it might be more harmful due to elevated water temperatures. So the point of this really was to get a snapshot of what the salt level looks like across the watershed at a given time, which we use then really to inform some of our communication stuff and also think about areas that we might want to monitor a little more intensively to look at maybe if there's a specifically high spike somewhere to get some more continuous monitoring in those types of areas. So here then quickly, because I want to roll through this, is just the data here from those sampling events. So we did one event in April, which I think we had about 10 sites. And then in the fall, in October, we did one that had about 30 different sites. So you can see here the conductivity results and also some of the chloride numbers from that as well using the test strip data. I'm just going to keep rolling through, but if we get the questions and people want to look at that further, we certainly can. So here then on the right, you'll just see a map sort of that shows a little bit better of a picture of what the salt level looks like in our streams across the watershed. The areas in blue there are stream sections that we haven't necessarily assessed. Some of those are due to challenges with the fact that they're underground for most of the reach. So again, before doing some of this volunteer work and collecting some of this other stuff, we didn't necessarily have an idea of the issues with road salt in our watershed and how bad they were, even though we're working in water, water quality monitoring and watershed health. Wasn't necessarily something we were looking at, which is something to think about in regards to if we weren't necessarily looking at it for a number of years or really tuned into it, how can we expect the applicators and the municipalities and stuff, how are they going to know what the effects are if we don't? So another sort of, Dave mentioned a little bit, but some of our volunteers have been participating in the Isaac Walton League's Winter Salt Watch, which is now just the Salt Watch. People have collected during winter storm events, but also throughout the year as well. So really rolling into, we got about 10 minutes left, I want to save some time for questions. Some of the communication stuff that we've sort of been working on. Again, I mentioned in regards to salt in our streams, we hadn't necessarily been thinking about it either. So how are we going to expect that municipalities really understand the extent of the issue? If you think about it, for the average person during a snowstorm, the main concern is, can I drive on the roads? When can I drive on the roads? Are they safe? That's the main concern that needs to be weighed for municipalities, but also, as we learn more, it has to be a balancing act between safety on the roads, but also safety after the snow's gone for our streams, and how much we're actually altering and affecting those as well. So sort of some of the focus that we've really been working on initially here as we collect some data is just educating people and getting people to think about the issue itself. So in working with Stroud and working with some of our other partners like Pennypack, Wissahick, and we've been working to get some media attention. We've had a couple big articles in the local newspapers and online, a couple interviews and stuff as well, which has sort of started to build up a little bit of momentum and get people to think more about the issue. We've also hosted twice annually. Usually we host a municipal task force, which brings together our municipal partners, but also some of our private landowners who we have restoration projects with, and some of our like residential partners as well. Really anybody who's interested, we host a couple of these a year. Last year was the first year that we really talked about it, but in the winter we had Stroud present. We talked a little bit about some of the road salt issues in our watershed, really just to get people again thinking about it and realizing that there is an issue again. And this year here in the winter, we're going to have another one that presents a little bit more of some of the specific data that we've been collecting as well. And then additionally, we actually had a streamkeeper last year who presented, who talked at and provided testimony at a road salt hearing from the Philadelphia Streets Department. There was a lot of other local organizations in the area. We had a streamkeeper who lives in Philadelphia present, sort of to be a little more impactful, and that he's not paid to go on there and talk. This is really something that he cares about and wanted to talk about. And then just lastly, you could see this on the website that Colleen was showing before. We worked with Stroud to put together this fact sheet here. We originally had a fact sheet, but it was a lot of like generalized statements about things that you can do and general ideas about the problem. So this fact sheet that we put together, which you can collect your own data, change it around. We just want to see people use it. We have this map that I highlighted before, as well as some data on the back that really brings in some more information about the issue for our local decision makers, our local municipalities. So we've been working to share that data with them, share that data with the public. One question that people probably have is, if somebody sees a pile of road salt or over salting on the road and they contact the organization, what do? We generally try and refer them to reach out to their township and send an email. The more the townships hear about it, the more that they hear from their constituents that it's an issue, the more weight that it's going to carry versus just hearing from us over and over again that it's an issue. That is pretty much what I have, just to respect some time for questions. So if there's any questions now, I guess the floor is open, right, Colleen?
Hey, Ryan and Colleen, I just want to add something real quick to that. Seeing the increased chloride levels in the creeks made me wonder if it's getting into our drinking water. So I went online and I found the water quality report from my drinking water provider, and chloride wasn't one of the parameters listed. So I gave them a call, and the person I spoke with said, oh, if it's not listed, that means there were no detectable levels. And I said, oh, I don't think that's true, because your report has non-detectable levels for other parameters. So she put me in touch with one of their chemists, and I learned that chloride is considered a secondary pollutant, so it's not required to be in the report. But the chemist gave me some information, and there are spikes in chloride levels in our drinking water after winter road salting events. And also the chloride level in our drinking water frequently exceeds the levels recommended in the 2003 EPA drinking water advisory called Consumer Acceptability Advice and Health Effects Analysis on Sodium. So that's just another aspect that's kind of developing on the salt chloride issue.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ryan and Dave. That was amazing information. You all are doing great work. If folks have questions, we have a couple minutes to take those questions. I know there were some in the chat from Liz, and I see that you answered them in the chat. Liz, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on anything. You're welcome to.
No, I think Shane actually dropped in one of the documents that goes through. There's different levels for E. coli colony forming units, depending on how many samples you're collecting or the volume of sampling you're collecting, if you're doing like a geometric mean. So that's in the chat. 2 comments before for my response. And yeah, nurdle pollution, since litter pollution wasn't on that initial list, obviously we get there's tons of plastic pollution everywhere, and at some of our sites we started to see those plastic pellets, which are called nurdles, and in Western New York they're shipped in from Texas, where they're created, and they can be spilled in different locations, from trucks, trains, even on oceans or Great Lakes, if they're shipped through the big cargo containers, or at plastic manufacturing facilities. Sometimes they'll have spills in their storage silos where they fill up those big, like farm silos full of those plastic pellets. If the truck fills them too much, the top pops and they go airborne. Or they might leave the site if there's a stormwater drain and connect to a waterway that way. So that facility that's nearby has updated their materials handling manual after we reached out to them and showed some of the findings we were seeing along the river nearby.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I also was not sure what nurdles were. That's fascinating. So I see Ryan put his email in the chat. I'm also going to put my email in the chat if folks want to dig in a little bit deeper about the webpage, or focus on any specific volunteer programming. Certainly feel free to reach out. I also put a survey in the chat if you have 30 seconds to let us know how we did and how we can improve in the future. Any additional questions? I know we have a minute, but take any questions? Doesn't look like it. Okay, great. Well, again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you spending the hour with us, and again, definitely reach out if you have additional questions. Thank you all. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you, Ryan, Liz, and Dave. You all are doing amazing work, and thank you so much for sharing it with us today. So thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, Colleen.